Welcome to Northwest Air Guns. I'm John, and our victim today is this Beeman R7, aka HW30, and specifically the trigger unit. It has a Rekord trigger in it. We are going to take the trigger out, disassemble it, reassemble it, and put it back in the gun. Now there are quite a few videos out there on the Rekord trigger and how to do that, but we're going to approach it a little bit differently, and this may be a benefit to some people who struggle with it, getting all the springs in place and holding things together. This video is based on a method that I learned from Randy Bimrose, who was the chief gunsmith there at Beeman's for many years, and I think had factory training on these HW rifles. I took a class from him up at Lassen gunsmithing school in 2007, and in that class he handed out a tool list that included some specialty tools for the Rekord trigger. There's a bushing, a slave pin, and a punch that we then went and made, and it makes it easier for me anyway, and I hope it gives you some ideas on how you might use slave pins or other tools to help you get these things apart and back together. So what happened, he handed out this tool list, Randy did, and there were several of us in the class that were familiar with machine tools, and we took the drawings over next door to the classroom into the Lassen College machine shop, and we were able to make a set of these tools for everybody in the class. I think I made the punch, another guy made the sear bushing, another guy made the slave pin, and so anyway, everybody was in the class walked out with a set of these. And we're not going to deal with this piston sear or stop pin because you can use a paper clip or anything. It's not really a special tool per se that you'd have to make using any kind of machine tool or anything. So let's take a look at these. So our first specialty tool is this slave pin, and this is one that will hold things together and fit inside the frame of the trigger unit. And so you put it in with this, and then you can put the real pin through the frame and drive this out, and you'll see that when we get into it. This is a bushing. There's a couple of bushing. There's two bushings, and this one is used when we put the piston sear in. It holds a sear and a spring together so that you can manipulate those into place and then install the real bushing. And then this is a tool that you use to drive the bushing out. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started on our trigger. All right, so we're going to start out here with 3 screws that hold the stock on. One in the front here, one in the front of the trigger guard, and one in the rear of the trigger guard. Okay, then you'll notice we have 2 pins here, one in the back, one in the front, and we're going to drive those out. Start with the one in the back here. There's that one. And at this point you should be able to hold the safety because there's a spring in there. If you don't pull this down, it'll fly off on you. So we're going to hold the safety in place and just tilt that down. So there's our safety and our safety spring. Set those aside, and then we'll just drive out the front pin here. And here's the front pin, and if you notice, front pin is front pin is longer than the rear pin. And then this should just come on out like that. So there's our trigger. And let's see, to get this apart, we have the tools that I mentioned earlier. So this tool is for the to drive out these bushings, one here and one here on the piston sear. This is a bushing for the piston sear that would hold this with the spring together while you put it together and then drive in the actual bushing. Our third tool is this slave pin, and that's used for this pin and this pin to get those started. Kind of keep everything in place while you're doing it. So where do we start? I think the first thing is to take off the trigger spring tensioner, I guess. It's how you adjust the tension on the trigger spring. So that comes out. There's your spring and there's your adjustment screw. We don't lose those. And then the first thing we take out is the piston sear. And I don't know if it matters if you drive it out right to left, but we're just going to take it out like that. There's the bushing. And when we pull this out, there's some spring tension, so you have to kind of grab it. Shouldn't be that hard, but okay. There it is. So that comes out with this spring. You notice there's a cutout there, and the spring fits like this with a dog leg here underneath the sear, and this tail is going to go, let's see, it's going to go underneath or on top of this pin here when we put it back together. So that all goes aside. We can go ahead and drive out this bushing. It just makes it easier when we put things together. Okay, for our next trick, we're going to take out the trigger sear and the tongue. And normally these will have kind of a mark that shows you they were taken out from, or they were punched in from this side, and they should be able to get started with just finger pressure. This one you can see is kind of marked up, and I get the impression that these may have been, well, I don't know what side they were driven in on. So we're just going to do the best we can with that and drive them out the way it looks like they should go. So we'll take out this one first, and this is a little bit above the surface, so we'll take it out from this side here. Okay, well, we're able to push it through most of the way. And there it is. There's the pin right there. And this one isn't under spring tension, but there's some other things that are in there that put tension on it. Oh, I forgot to mention this nut. This is what holds the rear trigger guard screw in place, and it fits right in there. So you don't want to forget about that and have, lose it or something. So here's our tongue and trigger sear, and they go in there something like that orientation. Set those aside for now. Then we have the upper rear sear stop. And in this case, it's coming out already. So this one is, like I say, somebody's been in here. There's the pin. And this one has a little bit of spring tension. There's the sear, the spacer, and a spring here. So this one connects with your piston sear. Let's see, is that right? No, like this. Something like that. And the spacer goes on the back side of this one. And the spring would, let's see, well, it would start something like that, and then you're going to bend this long leg around the pin inside the housing here. So there's that one. We'll set all that aside. And the spacer, don't want to lose the spacer. And now we just have the trigger itself. And I guess we can take the trigger out. Let's see. Okay. There's the trigger pin. And then the trigger comes out. There it is. So that's all there is to it, getting it apart. And actually getting it apart is pretty easy. It's the getting it back together that kind of takes some doing. Okay, well, putting it together is kind of the opposite of taking it apart. Start with our trigger here. It's important that it face forward. And our pin came out by hand. There it is. Okay, so there's the trigger. Okay, let's put this rear, what is it? The rear upper sear lock, this thingy here. This is going to go in there like that. But we're going to install it upside down so that we can, well, it's just easier with the spring tension from this spring. And you also have to install it in front of this little tab here. So let's see here. The spring, something like that. Okay. There's our spring. Put our spacer on the other side. And then our slave pin goes in like so. And so that'll hold it all together. And then we'll install it upside down like this because the leg of this spring here is going to catch on this pin right here. When we spin it around, it'll come back to the proper orientation. So put it in front of this tab, down like so. Okay. And we're close. And get started here. And there goes our pin. By hand. Now we should be able to put that up like that. See, it's got spring tension on it now from the leg of the spring on this pin here. Okay, we got that one. For the next, for our next trick, we're going to put in the trigger sear and the tongue, and just to kind of keep this guy out of the way, we're going to go ahead and block it. And we're going to use one of the, I think it's this pin here, to stick it in there. And kind of block it off. Okay, so that's secure there. Okay, like that. It's out of the way. And these two are pinned together, and they're going to go kind of like that, although this goes inside there. And so we'll try and use the slave pin again and see if that helps. Okay, and start this in there. Okay, we'll go underneath that pin and that spring, and there we go. Okay, there's our, let's see here, there is our slave pin in there, and there we go. So it's lined up good. Take our pin, put it in. Hopefully a little jiggle here. Yeah, we're off again. You put it in, try and manipulate that slave pin to where it's in the opening. Right there. And there's the slave pin. Come on. Don't give up on me here. Okay. Help me out. I'm trying to do a demonstration here. Okay. Tap it in maybe. Yeah, a little persuasion sometimes helps. So there's all of that. And now, well, for our last trick, we're going to put the piston sear in. And it has a spring with a leg on it here, dog leg. Goes underneath the spring, like that. The other leg is going to fit around this pin here. So we're going to take our slave bushing and it's going to go in kind of like this. I'm going to turn it over. Let's see where to go. There it is. Okay. What I want to do is get my tool in here. There we go. Okay, that kind of holds it all in place. And we're going to put that bushing just so it sticks out of this side. We don't want to take it out altogether, the slave bushing. Okay, so you see it's, let's see what side the spring on. Yeah, this is right. So now we can take this out, I hope, yeah. Put the real bushing in. And we should there it is. There's our slave bushing right there. And there's our trigger. Now we just got this last bushing to put in. And it's together. Now there's a hole here, and the purpose of that is if you, oh, we got to put our some spring tension. It doesn't really work very well. if you don't have any tension on the trigger. So we'll put this back in here. Okay, now we can set our trigger. Like that. And this little hole is so you can put something through there, and then you can fire the trigger, but it doesn't slam the piston sear down on the tongue here. Keeps it kind of protected, so you're not going to mess that up. And then the adjustments, of course, for trigger weight is here on this screw, and the engagement of the sear, you can see it in that little window there, is adjusted by this screw here, and this is a Torx screw. So as you pull the trigger, if you look in here, you can see the sears moving. And so anyway, that's how it works. Okay, then putting it back is kind of the opposite of taking it apart, and it's easier if it's caulked. Well, let's go ahead and put it back together. All right, well, first we're going to caulk it, and then go ahead and insert it. We want to get that front pin lined up here. Looks pretty good. Drive the long pin in. So next we're going to put our safety in with the spring on it. Goes in here, and we're going to hold that in while we slip that up. And that hole should be pretty well lined up. Looks good. Okay, and there you go. Now what you would do at this point is caulk the gun and make sure it works okay, check the safety, put a pellet in it, shoot it in a safe direction, and make sure everything works right. But that's basically all there is to it. Oh, one last thing I forgot to mention. When you put the stock back on, this rear stock screw here through the trigger guard goes into this nut. So you have to make sure that that nut goes back in here before you put it all back together. There we go. And now we're ready. All right, well, that's the Bimrose method of disassembling and reassembling the Rekord trigger. And I hope this is helpful. Like I say, even if you don't make these specialty tools, hopefully this gives you some ideas on some other things that you might be able to use to help get these things apart and back together.